we're ready to go set things up on DigitalOcean. I'm going to leave this window open because, again, I'm going to need that key here in a few minutes. So I'm just going to close this down, and I'm going to go into my browser. And I'm just going to go to DigitalOcean.com. Now, if you don't have a DigitalOcean account, if you check down in the text that accompanies this video, there's a special link for you there. You can click that link and sign up, and you'll get a $100 credit for that. But simultaneously, I will also receive a benefit from that. It's not really a sponsorship. It's just a program that they have, an affiliate program, and that's my affiliate link down there in the text below this video. So that'll help me out. I don't get cash for it. I just get credit, which is fine. I'm going to sign in. I've logged into DigitalOcean, and I'm ready to go ahead and set up my server. So what we're really doing here is we're setting up a virtual machine. A virtual machine is kind of like a computer, except instead of it running on regular traditional hardware like the computer sitting in front of you, it's actually running on a very large server, and that very large server gets partitioned out into smaller chunks called virtual machines. This is advantageous because you can move virtual machines around in the event of problems in the infrastructure. You can also size them up and size them down very easily, and that usually affects your billing. The reason I picked DigitalOcean is because their pricing model is extremely straightforward and easy to understand, and you really can't say that about any other cloud service out there. So they're not a sponsor or anything. I mentioned that already. I just like them, and they have everything we need, so we're just going to use DigitalOcean. It's not free, but it is pretty inexpensive, and I'll keep the bill for you down below $5. Unless, of course, you signed up using the link I gave you, then you should have a $100 credit at that point. It's spread out over 60 days. But that should be more than enough to get through this course and potentially even set up a website for a month or two just so you can get some practice. Okay, let's go ahead and create our virtual machine. There's a big green button up here at the top. So I'll click Create, and I'm going to go for a droplet. A droplet is just DigitalOcean's marketing term for a virtual machine. So we'll click Droplet. Seems like all the cloud providers have different ones. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is pick an operating system. Now, it's already set to Ubuntu 18.04, which is what I want. You could change the version to something else if you wanted to. 18.04 is currently the long-term support version of this. There's also a 20.04, which is a later long-term support version of that. I'm going to stick with this one, though, just because I know everything's going to work. This is brand new, and they may have changed some things. So I'm going to stick with the one that I've been using for a long time and just stay with 18.04. If you wanted something else, you could go with FreeBSD, which is a very secure operating system. These, however, are not compatible exactly with what we're going to do in the course. Meaning FreeBSD commands, Fedora commands, and CentOS commands are going to be different than the ones that we're executing in Ubuntu. Ubuntu is based on Debian, and you can see we have a Debian installation here, so if you prefer that, that should work just fine, but I'm going to stick with Ubuntu for this one. So next, let's scroll down a little bit and take a look at the plan. We're just going to go with basic. This is going to be a very general purpose, simple machine. It's not going to have anything crazy on it. You can create memory optimized, CPU optimized machines, and those are handy if you're doing heavy workloads, but we're not. Serving a website is not a heavy load. Even if you have 100,000 users a day, it's not a big compute task. When you compare it against, things like rendering out videos or doing 3D work or graphics work, things like that, things that are computationally intensive, or maybe, mining or scientific work or big data stuff, the kind of computers you need for that, you need powerful computers to do that stuff. You don't need a powerful computer to serve web pages. It's just not that big of a load. So we're going to leave it on basic, $40 a month. I don't want to pay that much, so I'm going to zip this over to the $5 a month plan. And I'll pick that one. That's 1 gigabyte, 1 CPU. So it's not a lot of RAM, but it's enough. 25 gigs of disk space and a terabyte of transfer. So this is perfect for me. If I have a site that uses a lot of file downloads, I might want to add some block storage. So if you have something that they're going to be downloading, that is something that you might want to add. But this is really about keeping it simple and focusing on learning Linux and setting up a web server. That just leaves the next step, which is choosing a data center. You should pick one that's close to you. I live in Texas, which is right smack in between New York and San Francisco, so either of those would work for me. I usually put everything in New York 1 just because that's the first one. The numbers underneath represent their data centers, so they have New York 1, 2, and 3, Amsterdam 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes some of them are unavailable for different reasons, so I can pick New York 1 or New York 3. The only time this matters is if you want to make several servers that can talk to each other. If you want to make several virtual machines, several droplets that can talk to each other, like maybe you put your web server on one, your database server on another, and your API server on another, that kind of setup, then you want to pick the same data center for all of those dependencies, all of those systems that are supposed to talk to each other. But we're not doing that, so I'm just going to stick with New York 1. I don't need a private IP address. I don't need IPv6 support. And now we're down to the point that I was alluding to earlier. So there's two ways to set it up. You can set it up with traditional password, or you can set it up with SSH keys. And this is generally the preferred way of working with this. So what I'll do is I'll click New SSH key. And now I need to go over to PowerShell again, or your terminal if you're on a Mac. And on a Mac, you can type cat, and then you can punch in .ssh, and then id_rsa.pub. But that doesn't work on Windows. Oh, it actually does work on Windows. Yay, they finally fixed that. I was going to say the other way to do it is to use the word type. That's usually the Windows way of doing it, but it looks like they have entered the golden age where cat actually works. So cat will just display the text file. Now we just need to copy this whole thing. So I'm going to right click, select edit, select copy. Now I'm going to switch back over to my browser, and I'm going to paste this in, and it should go from red to blue. We're going to give this a name. So I'll call it Mad Dev Skills Linux course. You can name it whatever you want. You can see I have several of them here, but this is the one that we're going to use. If you had multiples, like these are all different computers, I could check each one of these and use any SSH key that I already have if I wanted to access it from multiple systems. Next, it's how many droplets. We're only going to make the one, and we can give it a name if we want to. So you can rename this into anything that you want. I'm just going to leave it the way it is, though. I don't really care what my server is called. If you have a special one for a project, maybe a project name or a product name, or you want to name it the name of your domain, that's all great. You can use that. This one just tells me, though, by looking at it, I can tell that it's Ubuntu. I can tell that it's the server edition. It's got one virtual CPU, 1 gigabyte of RAM, and it's in New York City Data Center 1. So that's the decoding of that. If you have a bunch of these, sometimes it helps to add tags, but we don't. If you're going to production, which is really what I'm showing you how to do, you would definitely want to enable backups. I'm going to skip it because this is just part of the course, but if I were going into a real situation where I was going to host a website, I would turn this on, and it's only an extra $1 a month. So that is well worth the price. I'll click Create Droplet. And this is going to take a few minutes before it's actually done. I'm back, and it worked. We can see that we have a green dot next to it telling us that it's good to go. We can click on it and see all of the information on it, including the IP address, which is what we're going to need to connect to it. And we're going to do that in the next video. Sometimes this takes a while, but this one went pretty fast. So if you have to wait, 5 or 10 minutes, that's not incredibly unusual and nothing to worry about. We're ready to connect to this virtual machine, and I'll show you how to do that in the next video. If you found value in this video, if you learned something new, help me out with a like and subscribe. For more videos on software development and DevOps from a developer's perspective, check us out at maddevskills.com or on Twitter @devskills.